There we go. Hello, everybody. Hello, everybody. Do. I put the phone so I can see if there's going to be a chat. Hi. Are you pretty good? She's good girl for me. There we go. Maybe I'll cut some fur around your eyes. Oh, hold on. Oh, your eyes bothering you? Is that better? Is that better? Yeah. You want something nice to smell? Hold on, guys. I'll be right with you. Oop. There we go. There we go. I think you're all set now. Yeah? Are you all set now? Yeah. So, good morning, good morning. It's a bright and sunshiny day. Hey, yeah. I was gonna call while I listen to the Bible, but yep, she wants to be up here. But if there's a time that she leaves, I'm gonna call her. So, I never know, it might work this time. Joe is, well, no, I don't know why, but there's no way of me. There must be a new way on here. Save report, share. Oh, that. No. It's just top message. That's okay. I don't need it. I got. The phone's on live chat, so. Yeah. Alright, let's get started. Our Father which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, in earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our sins. I'm sorry. And forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive them that trespass against us, and lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. Thank you, Jehovah, for another beautiful day on your beautiful earth. And thank you for allowing us to wake up today. And thank you for what you did for us past, present, and in the future. What you will do for us in the future. It's, Please continue to help Braxton with his broken arm. He's going to be getting it off soon. And Casey's going to get her braces off. That's good. Please look after the Binghams and Adams. Please continue to look after Tate with his heart condition and his cancer. Cindy Lee, King Charles, Princess Kate, Jen's friend Shannon, Danielle Fischel, also known as Topanga from Boy Meets World. They all have cancers, different stages and different kinds. Give them physical and mental strength to fight off their cancers. Continue to help Celine Dion, who has stiff person syndrome. She has seizures and a lot of pain. Oh, I watched a video on it and I wish I never watched it. Whew. Jenny, she's been having problems tomorrow. She has an appointment for them to put the scope in her tummy to see what's going on in there. And continue to help Christina's daughter with her pregnancy or baby. I don't know if she had it yet or if she's due yet. Tiffany and her hubby, well, her boyfriend, well, fiance, and her, look after her son as well, Robin Taylor, in her hips. Please take that hip pain away that she has yesterday because she got injections in both her hips. She's eventually going to need a new hip or surgery on the hip and her knee. Please look after her. Don't. Please take her pain away. Miss Diane and daughters. Arnie, Vicky, and her family. Please look after her mother, who had hip surgery because she broke her hip. Also, look after Keely's dad, who's getting better. He might be home right now. So, and Carol and the mom. Please help them. In the name of Jesus, amen. Amen. Okay. We can't do that. Even though we really want to. Yeah, I gotta trim around here. Stop. I gotta trim around here. Make all that little shorter so it doesn't poke you in your eye. Yeah. Okay. This might work. It might not work. Oh, that came out early. It's okay, baby. It's okay. Boop. Oh, it won't let me. Oh. Hold on. The app crashed.
Hezekiah became king at the age of 25, and he reigned for 29 years in Jerusalem. His mother's name was Abijah, the daughter of Zechariah. He kept doing what was right in Jehovah's eyes, just as David his forefather had done. In the first year of his reign, in the first month, he opened the doors of the house of Jehovah and repaired them. Then he brought the priests and the Levites and assembled them in the square to the east. He said to them, "Listen to me, you Levites. Now sanctify yourselves and sanctify the house of Jehovah, the God of your forefathers, and remove what is impure from the holy place. For our fathers have been unfaithful and have done what was bad in the eyes of Jehovah our God. They abandoned him and turned their faces away from the tabernacle of Jehovah and turned their back on him. They also closed the doors of the porch and extinguished the lamps. They stopped burning incense and offering up burnt sacrifices in the holy place to the God of Israel. Therefore, Jehovah's indignation came against Judah and Jerusalem, so that he made them an object of horror and astonishment and a cause for whistling, as you can see with your own eyes. Here our forefathers fell by the sword, and our sons, our daughters, and our wives went into captivity for this. Now it is my heart's desire to make a covenant with Jehovah, the God of Israel, so that his burning anger may turn away from us. My sons, now is not the time to be negligent, for Jehovah has chosen you to stand before him, to serve as his ministers, and to make his sacrifices smoke." At that, the Levites, Mahath the son of Amasai, and Joel the son of Azariah of the Kohathites. From the Merarites, Kish the son of Abdi, and Azariah the son of Jehalelel. From the Gershonites, Joah the son of Zimmah, and Eden the son of Joah. From the sons of Elizaphan, Shimri and Jeuel. From the sons of Asaph, Zechariah and Mattaniah. From the sons of Heman, Jehiel and Shimei. From the sons of Jeduthun, Shemaiah and Uzziel. Then they gathered their brothers together themselves and came, as the king had commanded by the words of Jehovah, to cleanse the house of Jehovah. The priests then went inside the house to do the cleansing, and brought out all the uncleanness that they found in the temple of Jehovah, and took it to the courtyard of the house of Jehovah. In turn, the Levites took it and carried it outside to the Kidron Valley. Thus they began the sanctification on the first day of the first month, and on the 8th day of the month they reached the porch of Jehovah. They sanctified the house of Jehovah for 8 days, and on the 16th day of the first month they finished. After that they went in to King Hezekiah and said,
"We have cleansed the whole house of Jehovah, the altar of burnt offering and all its utensils, and the table of the layer bread and all its utensils, and all the utensils that King Ahaz cast aside during his reign when he acted unfaithfully, we have made ready and sanctified, and they are before the altar of Jehovah."
And King Hezekiah got up early and gathered the princes of the city together, and they went up to the house of Jehovah. They brought 7 bulls, 7 rams, 7 male lambs, and 7 male goats as a sin offering for the kingdom, for the sanctuary, and for Judah. So he told the priests, the descendants of Aaron, to offer them up on the altar of Jehovah. Then they slaughtered the cattle, and the priests took the blood and sprinkled it on the altar. Next they slaughtered the rams and sprinkled the blood on the altar. And they slaughtered the male lambs and sprinkled the blood on the altar. Then they brought the male goats of the sin offering before the king and the congregation, and laid their hands on them. The priests slaughtered them and made a sin offering with their blood on the altar to make atonement for all Israel, because the king said that the burnt offering and the sin offering should be for all Israel. Meanwhile, he had the Levites stationed at the house of Jehovah with cymbals, stringed instruments, and harps, by the commandment of David and of Gad the king's visionary and of Nathan the prophet, for the commandment was from Jehovah through his prophets. So the Levites were standing with the instruments of David, and the priests with the trumpets. Then Hezekiah ordered that the burnt sacrifice be offered on the altar. When the burnt offering started, the song of Jehovah started, and also the trumpets, following the direction of the instruments of King David of Israel. And the whole congregation bowed down while the song was sung, and the trumpets were sounding. All this continued until the burnt offering was finished. And as soon as they finished making the offering, the king and all those with him bowed low and prostrated themselves. King Hezekiah and the princes now told the Levites to praise Jehovah with the words of David and of Asaph the visionary. So they offered praise with great rejoicing, and they bowed down and prostrated themselves. Then Hezekiah said,
"Now that you have been set apart for Jehovah, come and bring sacrifices and thanksgiving offerings to the house of Jehovah."
So the congregation began to bring sacrifices and thanksgiving offerings, and everyone with a willing heart brought burnt offerings. The number of burnt offerings that the congregation brought was 70 cattle, 100 rams, 200 male lambs, all of these as a burnt offering to Jehovah, and the holy offerings were 600 cattle and 3,000 of the flock. But there were not enough priests to skin all the burnt offerings. So their brothers the Levites helped them out until the work was finished, and until the priests could sanctify themselves. For the Levites were more conscientious about sanctifying themselves than the priests were. Also, there were many burnt offerings, as well as the fat pieces of the communion sacrifices and the drink offerings for the burnt offerings. Thus the service of the house of Jehovah was restored. So Hezekiah and all the people rejoiced over what the true God had established for the people, for this had all happened so suddenly. Chapter 30. Hezekiah sent word to all Israel and Judah, and even wrote letters to Ephraim and Manasseh, to come to the house of Jehovah in Jerusalem to observe the Passover to Jehovah, the God of Israel.
No.
However, the king, his princes, and the whole congregation in Jerusalem decided to observe the Passover in the 2nd month, for they had not been able to observe it at the regular time, because not enough priests had sanctified themselves, nor had the people gathered in Jerusalem. This arrangement seemed right in the eyes of the king and the entire congregation. So they decided to make an announcement throughout Israel, from Beersheba to Dan, that the people should come and observe the Passover to Jehovah, the God of Israel, at Jerusalem. For as a group they had not observed it according to what is written. Then the couriers went throughout all Israel and Judah with the letters from the king and his princes, as the king had commanded, saying,
"People of Israel, return to Jehovah, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, so that he may return to the remnant who escaped out of the hand of the kings of Assyria. Do not be like your forefathers and your brothers who acted unfaithfully toward Jehovah, the God of their forefathers, so that he made them an object of horror, just as you are seeing. Now do not be obstinate like your forefathers. Submit to Jehovah and come to his sanctuary that he has sanctified forever, and serve Jehovah your God, so that his burning anger may turn away from you. For when you return to Jehovah, your brothers and your sons will be shown mercy by their captors, and will be allowed to return to this land. For Jehovah your God is compassionate and merciful, and he will not turn his face away from you if you return to him."
So the couriers went from city to city throughout the land of Ephraim and Manasseh, even to Zebulun. But the people were making fun of them and mocking them. However, some individuals from Asher, Manasseh, and Zebulun humbled themselves and came to Jerusalem. The hand of the true God was also in Judah to unite them to carry out what the king and the princes had commanded by the word of Jehovah. A multitude of people gathered together at Jerusalem to observe the festival of unleavened bread in the second month. It was a very large congregation. They rose up and removed the altars that were in Jerusalem, and they removed all the incense altars and threw them into the Kidron Valley. Then they slaughtered the Passover sacrifice on the 14th day of the second month. The priests and the Levites felt ashamed, so they sanctified themselves and brought burnt offerings to the house of Jehovah. They took their customary places, according to the law of Moses, the man of the true God. Then the priests sprinkled the blood received from the hand of the Levites. There were many in the congregation who had not sanctified themselves, and the Levites were in charge of slaughtering the Passover sacrifices for all who were not clean, to sanctify them to Jehovah. For a great number of the people, especially those from Ephraim, Manasseh, Issachar, and Zebulun, had not cleansed themselves, but they still ate the Passover, contrary to what is written. But Hezekiah prayed for them, saying,
May Jehovah, who is good, make allowance for everyone who has prepared his heart to search for the true God, Jehovah, the God of his forefathers, although he has not been purified according to the standard of holiness.
And Jehovah listened to Hezekiah and pardoned the people. So the Israelites who were in Jerusalem observed the festival of unleavened bread for 7 days with great rejoicing. And the Levites and the priests were praising Jehovah day by day, loudly playing their instruments to Jehovah. Moreover, Hezekiah spoke to and encouraged all the Levites who served Jehovah with discretion. And they ate throughout the festival for 7 days, sacrificing communion sacrifices and giving thanks to Jehovah, the God of their forefathers. Then all the congregation decided to observe it for 7 more days. So they observed it for 7 more days with rejoicing. And King Hezekiah of Judah contributed for the congregation 1,000 bulls and 7,000 sheep. And the princes contributed for the congregation 1,000 bulls and 10,000 sheep. And priests were sanctifying themselves in great number. And all the congregation of Judah, the priests, the Levites, all the congregation that came from Israel, and the foreign residents who came from the land of Israel and those living in Judah, continued rejoicing. And there was great rejoicing in Jerusalem, for from the days of Solomon, the son of David, the king of Israel, nothing like this had happened in Jerusalem. Finally, the Levite priests stood up and blessed the people, and God heard their voice, and their prayer reached his holy dwelling, the heavens. Chapter 31. As soon as they had finished all of this, all the Israelites who were present went out to the cities of Judah, and they smashed the sacred pillars, cut down the sacred poles, and tore down the high places and the altars throughout Judah and Benjamin, as well as in Ephraim and Manasseh, until they had destroyed them completely. After which all the Israelites returned to their cities, each one to his own possession. Then Hezekiah appointed the priests in their divisions, and the Levites in their divisions, each of the priests and Levites for their service, for the burnt offerings and the communion sacrifices, to minister and to give thanks and praise in the gates of the courtyards of Jehovah. A portion of the king's own goods was given for the burnt offerings, including the morning and evening offerings, as well as the burnt offerings for the Sabbaths, the new moons, and the festivals, according to what is written in the law of Jehovah. Furthermore, he commanded the people living in Jerusalem to give the portion due the priests and the Levites, so that they might adhere strictly to the law of Jehovah. As soon as the order was issued, the Israelites gave in great quantities the first fruits of the grain, new wine, oil, and honey, and of all the produce of the field. They brought in abundantly the 10th of everything. And the people of Israel and of Judah living in the cities of Judah also brought in the tenth of cattle and sheep, and the tenth of the holy things that were sanctified to Jehovah their God. They brought it in and put it in many heaps. In the 3rd month they began laying their contributions in heaps, and in the 7th month they finished. When Hezekiah and the princes came and saw the heaps, they praised Jehovah and blessed his people Israel. Hezekiah asked the priests and the Levites about the heaps, and Azariah the chief priest of the house of Zadok said to him,
From the time they started bringing the contributions into the house of Jehovah, the people have been eating to satisfaction, and there is still an abundant surplus. For Jehovah has blessed his people, and this great plenty is left over.
At this Hezekiah told them to prepare storerooms in the house of Jehovah. So they prepared them. They kept faithfully bringing in the contributions, the tenth parts, and the holy things. Conaniah the Levite was put in charge of all of this as supervisor, and his brother Shimei was second. Jehiel, Azaziah, Nahath, Asahel, Jeremoth, Jozabad, Elio, Ismachiah, Mahath, and Benaiah were commissioners assisting Conaniah and his brother Shimei by the order of King Hezekiah, and Azariah was supervisor of the house of the true God. And Korah, the son of Imnah, the Levite gatekeeper on the east side, was in charge of the voluntary offerings of the true God, and he distributed the contribution made to Jehovah and the most holy things. And under his direction were Eden, Meniamin, Jeshua, Shemaiah, Amariah, and Shechaniah in the cities of the priests, in their office of trust, to distribute equally to their brothers in the divisions, to great and small alike. This was in addition to the distribution made to the males from 3 years old and up, who were listed in the genealogical enrollment, who came daily to serve in the house of Jehovah and to
Sorry about that.
carry out the duties of their divisions. The genealogical enrollment of the priests was by their paternal house, as was that of the Levites, who were 20 years old and up, by the duties of their divisions. The genealogical enrollment included all their children, their wives, their sons, and their daughters, their entire congregation, for they kept themselves sanctified for what was holy because of their office of trust, as well as the descendants of Aaron, the priests who were living in the fields of the pastures surrounding their cities. In all the cities, men had been designated by name to give portions to every male among the priests and to everyone included in the genealogical enrollment of the Levites. Hezekiah did this throughout Judah, and he continued to do what was good and right and faithful before Jehovah his God. And every work that he undertook to search for his God, whether in connection with the service of the house of the true God, or in the law and the commandment, he did wholeheartedly, and he was successful.
Get him. Good girl.
Chapter 32. After these things, and these acts of faithfulness, King Sennacherib of Assyria came and invaded Judah. He besieged the fortified cities, intent on breaking through and capturing them. When Hezekiah saw that Sennacherib had come and intended to wage war against Jerusalem, he decided, after consulting with his princes and his warriors, to stop up the waters of the springs outside the city, and they gave him their support. Many people were gathered together, and they stopped up all the springs and the stream that flowed through the land, saying,
Why should the kings of Assyria come and find plenty of water?
Furthermore, with determination, he rebuilt the entire broken-down wall and raised towers on it, and outside he made another wall. He also repaired the mound of the city of David, and he made a large number of weapons and shields. He then appointed military chiefs over the people and assembled them at the public square of the city gate and encouraged them, saying,
Be courageous and strong. Do not be afraid or be terrified because of the king of Assyria and all the multitude with him. For there are more with us than there are with him. With him is an arm of flesh, but with us is Jehovah our God to help us and to fight our battles.
And the people were strengthened by the words of King Hezekiah of Judah. After this, while King Sennacherib of Assyria was at Lachish with all his imperial might, he sent his servants to Jerusalem, to King Hezekiah of Judah, and to all the Judeans in Jerusalem, saying,
This is what King Sennacherib of Assyria says. In what are you trusting that you remain in Jerusalem while it is besieged? Is not Hezekiah misleading you and handing you over to die by famine and thirst, saying, Jehovah our God will rescue us from the hand of the king of Assyria? Is this not the same Hezekiah who removed your God's high places and his altars, and then said to Judah and Jerusalem, You should bow down before one altar, and on it you should make your sacrifices smoke? Do you not know what I and my forefathers did to all the peoples of the lands? Were the gods of the nations of the lands able to rescue their land from my hand? Who among all the gods of these nations that my forefathers devoted to destruction was able to rescue his people from my hand, so that your God should be able to rescue you from my hand? Now do not let Hezekiah deceive you or mislead you like this. Do not put faith in him, for no God of any nation or kingdom was able to rescue his people from my hand and from the hand of my forefathers. How much less then will your own God rescue you from my hand?
His servants said even more against Jehovah the true God, and against Hezekiah his servant. He also wrote letters to insult Jehovah the God of Israel, and to speak against him, saying,
Like the gods of the nations of the lands who could not rescue their people from my hand, so the God of Hezekiah will not rescue his people from my hand.
They kept calling loudly in the language of the Jews to the people of Jerusalem who were on the wall, to make them afraid and to terrify them, in order to capture the city. They spoke against the God of Jerusalem the same way as against the gods of the peoples of the earth, which are the work of man's hands. But King Hezekiah and the prophet Isaiah the son of Amoz kept praying about this, and crying out to the heavens for help. Then Jehovah sent an angel, and wiped out every mighty warrior, leader, and chief in the camp of the king of Assyria, so that he went back to his own land in disgrace. He later entered the house of his God, and there some of his own sons struck him down with the sword.
Wow.
So Jehovah saved Hezekiah and the inhabitants of Jerusalem from the hand of King Sennacherib of Assyria, and from the hand of all others, and gave them rest on every side. And many brought gifts to Jehovah at Jerusalem, and choice things to King Hezekiah of Judah. And he was greatly respected by all the nations after that. In those days Hezekiah became sick, and was at the point of death. And he prayed to Jehovah, who answered him and gave him a sign. But Hezekiah did not respond appreciatively to the good done to him, for his heart became haughty, bringing indignation against him and against Judah and Jerusalem. However, Hezekiah humbled himself for the haughtiness of his heart, he and the inhabitants of Jerusalem, and Jehovah's indignation did not come upon them in the days of Hezekiah.
I'll give it praise.
And Hezekiah came to have vast riches and glory. And he made storehouses for himself, for silver, gold, precious stones, balsam oil, shields, and for all the desirable articles. He also made storage places for the produce of grain, and new wine and oil, as well as stalls for all the different kinds of livestock, and stalls for the flocks. He also acquired cities for himself, and an abundance of livestock, flocks, and herds. For God gave him very many possessions. It was Hezekiah who stopped up the upper source of the waters of Gihon, and directed them straight down to the west, to the city of David. And Hezekiah was successful in every work of his. However, When the spokesmen of the princes of Babylon were sent to ask him about the sign that had occurred in the land, the true God left him alone to put him to the test, to get to know all that was in his heart. As for the rest of the history of Hezekiah and his acts of loyal love, they are written in the vision of Isaiah the prophet, the son of Amoz, in the book of the kings of Judah and of Israel. Then Hezekiah was laid to rest with his forefathers, and they buried him in the ascent to the burial places of the sons of David. And all Judah and the inhabitants of Jerusalem honored him at his death. And his son Manasseh became king in his place. Chapter 33. Manasseh was 12 years old when he became king, and he reigned for 55 years in Jerusalem. He did what was bad in Jehovah's eyes, following the detestable practices of the nations that Jehovah had driven out from before the people of Israel. He rebuilt the high places that his father Hezekiah had torn down. He set up altars to the Baals and made sacred poles, and he bowed down to all the army of the heavens and served them. He also built altars in the house of Jehovah, about which Jehovah had said, "In Jerusalem my name will be forever." And he built altars to all the army of the heavens in 2 courtyards of the house of Jehovah. And he made his own sons pass through the fire in the valley of the son of Hinnom. He practiced magic, used divination, practiced sorcery, and appointed spirit mediums and fortune tellers. He did on a grand scale what was bad in Jehovah's eyes to offend him. He put the carved image that he made into the house of the true God, about which God had said to David and to his son Solomon, "In this house and in Jerusalem, which I have chosen out of all the tribes of Israel, I will permanently put my name. And I will never again remove the feet of Israel from the land that I assigned to their forefathers, provided they carefully observe all that I have commanded them, the entire law, the regulations, and the judicial decisions given through Moses." Manasseh kept leading Judah and the inhabitants of Jerusalem astray, causing them to do worse than the nations that Jehovah had annihilated from before the Israelites. Jehovah kept speaking to Manasseh and his people, but they paid no attention. So Jehovah brought against them the army chiefs of the king of Assyria, and they captured Manasseh with hooks and bound him with 2 copper fetters and took him to Babylon. In his distress, he begged Jehovah his God for favor, and kept humbling himself greatly before the God of his forefathers. He kept praying to him, and he was moved by his entreaty, and heard his request for favor, and he restored him to Jerusalem to his kingship. Then Manasseh came to know that Jehovah is the true God. After this, he built an outer wall for the city of David west of Gihon in the valley, and as far as the fish gate. And he continued it around to Ophel, and he made it very high. Further, he appointed army chiefs in all the fortified cities in Judah. He then removed the foreign gods and the idol image from the house of Jehovah, and all the altars that he had built in the mountain of the house of Jehovah and in Jerusalem, and he had them thrown outside the city. He also prepared the altar of Jehovah, and began to offer up communion sacrifices and thanksgiving sacrifices on it. And he told Judah to serve Jehovah, the God of Israel. Nevertheless, the people were still sacrificing on the high places, although only to Jehovah their God. As for the rest of the history of Manasseh, his prayer to his God, and the words of the visionaries who spoke to him in the name of Jehovah the God of Israel, they are recorded in the history of the kings of Israel. Also his prayer, and how his entreaty was granted him, all his sins and his unfaithfulness, the locations where he built high places and set up the sacred poles and the graven images before he humbled himself,
What do you want?
they are written among the words of his visionaries. Then Manasseh was laid to rest with his forefathers, and they buried him at his house. And his son Amon became king in his place. Amon was 22 years old when he became king, and he reigned for 2 years in Jerusalem. And he continued to do what was bad in Jehovah's eyes, just as his father Manasseh had done. And Amon sacrificed to all the graven images that his father Manasseh had made, and he kept serving them. But he did not humble himself before Jehovah as Manasseh his father had humbled himself. Instead, Amon greatly increased his guilt.
People these days pronounce that Amon. But Amon, I like how they pronounce it, but I like that name, Amon.
Eventually, his servants conspired against him and put him to death in his own house. But the people of the land struck down all those who conspired against King Amon, and they made his son Josiah king in his place.
But did he do good?
Chapter 34. Josiah was 8 years old when he became king, and he reigned for 31 years in Jerusalem. He did what was right in Jehovah's eyes, and walked in the ways of David his forefather, and he did not deviate to the right or to the left. In the 8th year of his reign, while he was still a boy, he started to search for the God of David his forefather. And in the 12th year, he started to cleanse Judah and Jerusalem of the high places and the sacred poles, the graven images, and the metal statues. Further, they tore down the altars of the Baals in his presence, and he cut down the incense stands that were up above them. He also broke into pieces the sacred poles, the graven images, and the metal statues, and reduced them to powder, and sprinkled it over the graves of those who used to sacrifice to them. And he burned the bones of priests on their altars. Thus he cleansed Judah and Jerusalem. And in the cities of Manasseh, Ephraim, Simeon, and clear to Naphtali, in their surrounding ruins, he tore down the altars, and he crushed the sacred poles and the graven images, reducing them to powder. And he cut down all the incense stands in all the land of Israel, after which he returned to Jerusalem. In the 18th year of his reign, when he had cleansed the land and the temple, he sent Shaphan the son of Azaliah, Maaseiah the chief of the city, and Joah the son of Joahaz the recorder, to repair the house of Jehovah his God. They came to Hilkiah the high priest, and gave him the money that had been brought to the house of God, which the Levites serving as doorkeepers had collected from Manasseh, Ephraim, and all the rest of Israel, as well as from Judah, Benjamin, and the inhabitants of Jerusalem. Then they gave it to those who were appointed over the work in the house of Jehovah. In turn, the workers in the house of Jehovah used it to mend and repair the house. They gave it to the craftsmen and the builders to buy hewn stones and timbers for braces, and to build with beams the houses that the kings of Judah had allowed to fall into ruin. And the men did the work faithfully. Over them were appointed the Levites Jahath and Obadiah of the Merarites, and Zechariah and Meshullam of the Kohathites to serve as overseers. And the Levites, all of whom were skilled musicians, were in charge of the common laborers and were overseers of all those who were doing the work in every kind of service. And some of the Levites were secretaries, officers, and gatekeepers. While they were taking out the money that had been brought to the house of Jehovah, Hilkiah the priest found the book of Jehovah's law given through Moses. So Hilkiah said to Shaphan the secretary, "I have found the book of the law in the house of Jehovah." With that, Hilkiah gave the book to Shaphan. Then Shaphan brought the book to the king and told him,
"Your servants are doing everything that was assigned to them. They have poured out the money that was found in the house of Jehovah, and they have handed it over to the appointed men and to those doing the work."
Shaphan the secretary also told the king,
"There is a book that Hilkiah the priest has given me."
Then Shaphan began to read from it before the king. As soon as the king heard the words of the law, he ripped his garments apart. Then the king gave this order to Hilkiah, Ahikam the son of Shaphan, Abdon the son of Micah, Shaphan the secretary, and Asaiah the king's servant.
Go, inquire of Jehovah in my behalf, and in behalf of those who remain in Israel and in Judah, concerning the words of the book that has been found. For Jehovah's rage that will be poured out against us is great, because our forefathers did not carry out the word of Jehovah by observing all that is written in this book.
So Hilkiah, along with those sent by the king, went to Huldah the prophetess. She was the wife of Shallum, son of Tikvah, son of Harhas, the caretaker of the wardrobe, and she was dwelling in the second quarter of Jerusalem, and they spoke to her there. She said to them,
"This is what Jehovah, the God of Israel, says. Tell the man who sent you to me. This is what Jehovah says. I will bring calamity on this place and its inhabitants, all the curses that are written in the book that they read before the king of Judah. Abandon me and are making sacrifices smoked to other gods in order to offend me with all the works of their hands. My rage will pour out on this place, and it will not be extinguished. But to the king of Judah, who sent you to inquire of Jehovah, this is what you should say to him. This is what Jehovah, the God of Israel, says. Regarding the words that you have heard, because your heart was responsive, and you humbled yourself before God on hearing his words concerning this place and its inhabitants, and you humbled yourself before me and ripped your garments apart and wept before me, I also have heard you, declares Jehovah. That is why I will gather you to your ancestors, and you will be laid in your grave in peace, and your eyes will not see all the calamity that I will bring on this place and its inhabitants."
Then they brought the reply to the king. So the king sent word and summoned all the elders of Judah and Jerusalem. After that, the king went up to the house of Jehovah with all the men of Judah, the inhabitants of Jerusalem, the priests, the Levites, all the people, the great as well as the small. He read in their hearing all the words of the book of the covenant that had been found in the house of Jehovah. The king stood in his place and made a covenant before Jehovah that he would follow Jehovah and keep his commandments, his reminders, and his regulations with all his heart and with all his soul, by carrying out the words of the covenant that were written in this book. Furthermore, he had all those who were in Jerusalem and Benjamin to agree to it, and the inhabitants of Jerusalem acted according to the covenant of God, the God of their forefathers. Josiah then removed all the detestable things out of all the lands that belonged to the Israelites, and he made everyone in Israel serve Jehovah their God. Throughout his lifetime, they did not deviate from following Jehovah, the God of their forefathers. Chapter 35. Josiah held a Passover to Jehovah in Jerusalem, and they slaughtered the Passover sacrifice on the 14th day of the first month. He assigned the priests to their duties and encouraged them to carry out their service of the house of Jehovah. Then he said to the Levites, the instructors of all Israel, those who were holy to Jehovah,
Put the holy ark in the house that Solomon the son of David, the king of Israel, built. You are no longer to carry it on your shoulders. Now serve Jehovah your God and his people Israel, and prepare yourselves by your paternal houses according to your divisions, following what was written by King David of Israel and by his son Solomon. Stand in the holy place, grouped by the paternal houses of your brothers, the rest of the people, with a corresponding group of the paternal house of the Levites. Slaughter the Passover sacrifice, and sanctify yourselves, and make preparation for your brothers to carry out the word of Jehovah through Moses.
Josiah contributed flocks to the people, male lambs and young male goats, for the Passover sacrifices for all who were present, a total of 30,000, as well as 3,000 cattle. These were from the king's own property. His princes also made a contribution as a voluntary offering for the people, the priests, and the Levites. Hilkiah, Zechariah, and Jehiel, the leaders of the house of the true God, gave to the priests 2,600 Passover sacrifices and 300 cattle. Conaniah and his brothers, Shemaiah, and along with Hashabiah, Jael, and Jozabad, the chiefs of the Levites, contributed to the Levites 5,000 Passover sacrifices and 500 cattle. The service was prepared.
Sorry, guys.
The priests stood at their places, and the Levites by their divisions, as the king had commanded. They slaughtered the Passover sacrifices, and the priests sprinkled the blood they received from them, while the Levites were skinning the animals. Next, they prepared the burnt offerings so as to distribute them to the rest of the people, who were grouped by paternal house, so that they could be presented to Jehovah as it is written in the book of Moses. And they did the same with the cattle. They cooked the Passover offering over the fire according to the custom, and they cooked the holy offerings in pots, cauldrons, and pans, after which they brought it quickly to all the rest of the people. Then they made preparations for themselves and for the priests, because the priests, the descendants of Aaron, were offering up the burnt sacrifices and the fat pieces until nightfall. So the Levites made preparations for themselves and for the priests, the descendants of Aaron. And the singers, the sons of Asaph, were at their positions by the commandment of David, Asaph, Heman, and Jeduthun, the visionary of the king. And the gatekeepers were at the different gates. There was no need for them to leave their service, because their brothers the Levites made preparations for them. So all the service of Jehovah was prepared on that day to hold the Passover and to offer up the burnt offerings on the altar of Jehovah, according to the order of King Josiah. The Israelites who were present held the Passover at that time and the festival of unleavened bread for 7 days. There had never been held a Passover like it in Israel since the days of Samuel the prophet, nor had any of the other kings of Israel held a Passover like that held by Josiah, the priests, the Levites, all Judah and Israel who were present, and the inhabitants of Jerusalem. This Passover was held in the 18th year of Josiah's reign. After all of this, when Josiah had prepared the temple, King Necho of Egypt came up to fight at Carchemish by the Euphrates. Then Josiah went out against him. So he sent messengers to him, saying,
"What does this have to do with you, O king of Judah? I am not coming against you today, but my fight is against another house, and God says that I should hurry. For your own sake, refrain from opposing God, who is with me, or he will bring you to ruin."
However, Josiah would not turn away from him, but he disguised himself to fight against him, and would not listen to the words of Necho, which were from the mouth of God. So he came to fight in the plain of Megiddo. And the archers shot King Josiah.
Hi,
And
Carol.
the king said to his servants,
Get me out of here, for I am severely wounded.
So his servants took him out of the chariot, and had him ride in his second war chariot, and brought him to Jerusalem. Thus he died, and was buried in the tomb of his forefathers. And all Judah and Jerusalem mourned Josiah. And Jeremiah chanted over Josiah. And all the male and female singers keep singing about Josiah in their dirges down to this day. And a decision was made that they should be sung in Israel, and they are written among the dirges. As for the rest of the history of Josiah and his deeds of loyal love, in keeping with what is written in the law of Jehovah, and what he did from beginning to end, they are written in the book of the kings of Israel and of Judah. Chapter 36. Then the people of the land took Josiah's son Jehoahaz and made him king in Jerusalem in place of his father. Jehoahaz was 23 years old when he became king, and he reigned for 3 months in Jerusalem. However, the king of Egypt deposed him in Jerusalem, and fined the land 100 silver talents and a gold talent. Furthermore, the king of Egypt made Jehoahaz's brother Eliakim king over Judah and Jerusalem, and changed his name to Jehoiakim. But Necho took his brother Jehoahaz and brought him to Egypt. Jehoiakim was 25 years old when he became king, and he reigned for 11 years in Jerusalem. He continued to do what was bad in the eyes of Jehovah his God. King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon came up against him in order to bind him with 2 copper fetters to take him off to Babylon. And Nebuchadnezzar took some of the utensils of the house of Jehovah to Babylon and put them in his palace in Babylon. As for the rest of the history of Jehoiakim, the detestable things that he did, and what was found against him, it is written in the book of the kings of Israel and of Judah. And his son Jehoiakim became king in his place. Jehoiakim was 18 years old when he became king, and he reigned for 3 months and 10 days in Jerusalem. And he continued to do what was bad in Jehovah's eyes. At the start of the year, King Nebuchadnezzar sent to have him brought to Babylon, along with valuable articles of the house of Jehovah. And he made his father's brother Zedekiah king over Judah and Jerusalem. Zedekiah was 21 years old when he became king, and he reigned for 11 years in Jerusalem. He continued to do what was bad in the eyes of Jehovah his God. He did not humble himself before the prophet Jeremiah, who spoke at the order of Jehovah. He also rebelled against King Nebuchadnezzar, who had made him take an oath by God, and he remained stubborn and hard-hearted, and refused to turn to Jehovah, the God of Israel. All the chiefs of the priests, as well as the people, were exceedingly unfaithful, practicing all the detestable things of the nations, and they defiled the house of Jehovah that he had sanctified in Jerusalem. Jehovah, the God of their forefathers, kept warning them by means of his messengers, warning them again and again, because he felt compassion for his people and for his dwelling place. But they kept ridiculing the messengers of the true God, and they despised his words and mocked his prophets, until the rage of Jehovah came up against his people, until they were beyond healing. So he brought against them the king of the Chaldeans, who killed their young men with the sword in the house of their sanctuary. He felt no compassion for young man or virgin, old or infirm. God gave everything into his hand. All the utensils of the house of the true God, great and small, as well as the treasures of the house of Jehovah, and the treasures of the king and his princes, everything he brought to Babylon. He burned down the house of the true God, tore down the wall of Jerusalem, burned all its fortified towers with fire, and destroyed everything of value. He carried off captive to Babylon those who escaped the sword, and they became servants to him and his sons until the kingdom of Persia began to reign, to fulfill Jehovah's word spoken by Jeremiah, until the land had paid off its Sabbaths. All the days it lay desolate, it kept Sabbath, to fulfill 70 years. In the first year of King Cyrus of Persia, in order that Jehovah's word spoken by Jeremiah would be fulfilled, Jehovah stirred the spirit of King Cyrus of Persia to make a proclamation throughout his kingdom, which he also put in writing, saying,
"This is what King Cyrus of Persia says. Jehovah, the God of the heavens, has given me all the kingdoms of the earth, and he has commissioned me to build him a house in Jerusalem, which is in Judah. Whoever there is among you of all his people, may Jehovah his God be with him, and let him go up."
Oh. Is that it? Oh, that's it. I thought it was up to 39. Honest to God. So that's gonna be it for today. I'm gonna have the verse of the day uploaded soon. And I'm sorry about the cheer. There's nothing I can do about it. But I love you. Oh, Carol, stop, Michelle. All right, Carol, I'm still here. Hey, hold on, Carol. I'm getting to you. What is it, Mark? Mark 12. 28:34. Mark chapter 12, verses 28 through 34. One of the scribes who had come up and heard them disputing, knowing that he had answered them in a fine way, asked him, "Which commandment is first of all?" Jesus answered, "The first is, Hear, O Israel, Jehovah, our God is one Jehovah, and you must love Jehovah, your God, with your whole heart, and with your whole soul, and with your whole mind, and with your whole strength. The second is, you must love your neighbor as yourself. There is no other commandment greater than these." The scribe said to him, "Teacher, you spoke well, in line with truth. He is one, and there is no other beside him. And to love him with one's own heart, with one's whole understanding, and with one's whole strength, and to love one's neighbor as oneself is worth far more than all the whole burnt offerings and sacrifices." At this, Jesus, discerning that he had answered intelligently, and to him, "You are not far from the kingdom of God." But no one had the courage to question him any more. Very good, Carol. She's getting the whole story. It's not just what she wanted to do. So, alright, now I'm gonna go. I have to take her out and then get some breakfast in my tummy. So, I love you. Don't forget, love, don't judge, and don't hold